Our episode begins with Lies saying good morning to Alan because he had just woken up after that fight with the dragon. Alan apologizes because he just wanted to rest for a while, but he's overstepped the mark and Lies tells him it's okay. He asks where Beatrice and Akira are, as they were training at the time. Lies apologizes to Alan for not having told him that she had the ability to heal people. But Alan doesn't see a problem with this. He had heard rumors of a miracle-working saint, but he had no idea it was Lies, and he doesn't get upset with her, asking Lies not to worry. Whether she's a princess or a saint, Lies will always be what she was to him. Akira calls Alan to train with her and Beatrice, and he goes. After training, Akira says goodbye to the trio. Alan says she could go with them to the nearest town, but Akira doesn't like carriages, she prefers to walk around. The child that the dragon used as bait became very attached to Akira, and so she decided to take the child with her, as Akira had no desire to return the child to the village. Akira apologizes to Alan about the sword, but Alan replies that it's not her fault, but Akira feels guilty because she was supposed to defeat the dragon, but it was all in Alan's hands. Then she decides to leave with the child. We then see the Westfelt receiving the information that the red dragon had been defeated after luring the heroine. The informant tells Alan's father that the heroine had the saints' help. And we see that the clay wolves were sent by Alan's brother to attack Beatrice and Lies. As long as the saint and Beatrice are in their territory, the family will have countless opportunities to defeat them. The Westfelt patriarch asks his informant if they've found out where the elf is, and the informant tells him that there's no need to rush because he'll be sending the elf's head soon. The patriarch wants to bury these puppets of the gods and take revenge on the land and the gods. We then see Alan and Lies talking while Beatrice drives the carriage, Lies talking about a friend of hers who is a blacksmith who lived in a town not far from where they were called Grandhome. Lies was thinking of asking the blacksmith to make Alan a new sword. Alan didn't know there were cities on the border. Beatrice says it's rare to see elves as blacksmiths, but she had a good hand. Lies says that she really wanted to apologize to Alan because her revelation ended up involving him in the whole situation. Lies tells him that he doesn't have to do any of this if he wants to, but Alan accepts. Lies is happy, and Alan asks her if she doesn't have to go back to the capital because she is the princess after all. Lies said it was fine because she was with Beatrice and she had already told her father. Evening comes, they park the carriage, Beatrice is going to prepare the fire. However, at that very moment, Alan uses the ability Parallel Paradox Create Fire and quickly sets fire to the wood to create a bonfire. Lies finds it incredible and Beatrice is shocked by what she has seen, as Alan has made everything look so easy and fast. Then they rest by the fire until Lies falls asleep and falls into Alan's lap, but she wakes up immediately and apologizes. Alan says it's fine. Beatrice laughs at the situation and says that since they're engaged, it wouldn't be a problem for them to sleep on each other's laps. Lies was very embarrassed by what Beatrice had said. Lies says they were engaged. Beatrice agrees. Alan says that even then she could sleep. He didn't bother. Lies embarrassedly said that it bothered her. Beatrice and Lies fall asleep by the fire and Alan thinks that spending time like that was the first time he had been reincarnated in that world. The first time Alan and Lies saw each other, it was also a beautiful moonlit night. And then he remembers looking at the moon and Lies saying that the moon was beautiful. Alan didn't know Lies and asked her who she was. She apologizes for not introducing herself and says she is Lies at Ostella, and that he was counting on Alan from then on. And he doesn't understand why she said she wanted to count on him. And she was embarrassed to explain that Alan and she were engaged, at least that's what she knew. And he's surprised by what she says. Perhaps the peaceful life Alan had always wanted would be something like that. Then, after dawn, the trio arrived in the commercial part of the city of Grandhome with lots of people out shopping. Grandhome is such a lively place that it didn't even feel like a border. Beatrice says that adventurers and wanderers sometimes pass through there precisely because it's on the border. And then they arrive at the house of Liza's blacksmith friend. Lies believes that the blacksmith will forge the best sword for Alan. Beatrice thinks it's strange because normally the sound of hammering swords echoes outside. Lies thinks she might have left. Beatrice finds it suspicious for someone who doesn't care about anything other than making swords. Alan approaches the house and calls Lies because the door seems to be unlocked. And then he opens the door. Lies comes in along with Beatrice, shouting for Noel to check if she's home. There are several shields and swords made by her attached to the walls, and they are all very well made. Alan is amazed to see that the swords forged by Noel are better than his own. Suddenly Lies screams and Beatrice and Alan go to her, and Lies shows them that Noel is on the floor. Lies starts to get sick, but Beatrice picks up Noel's body and asks if Lies has forgotten the usual. Noel was asleep. Alan then asks if every time Noel faints from exhaustion, Lies heals her. Lies said yes, she hadn't seen Noel for a long time and was startled. Beatrice says that when Noel starts forging a weapon, she doesn't eat, drink, or sleep. She practically doesn't stop until she finishes her work. Lies always tells Noel to take better care of her health, but it doesn't seem to do much good. And then Noel finally gets up, stretching and saying that she slept so well. She was surprised because it had been a long time since she had seen Lies and Beatrice. Then she asks who that guy is who was with Lies and Beatrice. Beatrice replies to Noel saying that he is serving as Lies's guard and his name is Alan. And after introducing themselves, Noel understands that Lies wants her to forge a sword for Alan, and Lies confirms by saying that she always understands very quickly. Noel replies that it won't work. Lies is frustrated and doesn't understand. And Noel says that she has a backlog, she was too busy. Alan wonders if Noel is really Lies's friend. Lies is frustrated because she thought they really were friends. Noel told Lies that they were really friends, but that it had nothing to do with anything. Beatrice says that if you don't have time, there's nothing to do. Then Noel says that Alan already had a sword. And Alan shows that the sword was actually broken. And Noel says that a person with no skills wants to wield her sword, blaming the fact that the sword is broken on Alan's inefficiency. She then uses her skill to check the sword and sees that it has been used to its full potential. The sword was completely dead. She wondered how he had managed to use it up to that point. And then she tells Lies that she's changed her mind, she's going to make the sword for him. But before that, she wanted to ask Alan something. Noel asks Alan if he would like a sword that surpasses the sacred sword. And Beatrice says that the sacred sword is the one that only the hero can wield. They only exist for heroes, and Noel was offering a sword that surpassed the sacred sword. It didn't make much sense to her. And Noel confirms it would be a piece worth much more than any weapon she had forged back home. No matter how talented the blacksmith, if he doesn't know who is going to use the weapon, he can't do his best. It was necessary to have a user to match. Until now, she hadn't found anyone like that, and after analyzing Alan's broken sword, she valued him. And again, Noel asked if Alan would agree, and Alan, having heard everything she had said, had no reason to refuse. And then Noel gets to work, kicking everyone out of the house and remembering Vanessa. And there's a flashback of her forging a sword. Whatever the cost, Noel was going to forge that sword that surpasses the sacred sword. Lies was worried, hoping that Noel wouldn't overdo it. As long as Noel was forging that sword, she was going to pay attention to the trio. As they were going to stay in that town for a few days until Noel had finished forging the sword, they decided to look for an inn to stay in. However, there was a girl in a tree spying on the trio to notify the man who was working for the Westfelt family. And that mysterious girl goes to him to tell him, and he learns that the saint was there. It would be very convenient. But one thing bothered the old man, according to the Westfelt's information, was that the saint's personal guard was just one horsewoman. And the girl who was notifying him asked if perhaps they had the contract in that city. The old man wonders who the boy is who is with those girls. The old man believes that they need to investigate a little more. Then we see the inn where the trio will spend those days. Alan asks what they were going to do. Beatrice asks him why he doesn't relax and spend his days at ease. After all, that's what he always wanted. And Alan doesn't disagree. Lies asks him, since they were there, why Alan doesn't look at the Adventurers Guild. Beatrice believes that he could get a good price for the material he has collected from the Red Dragon. Alan thinks Beatrice is right, and since he was kicked out of the house, he had no money at all. Then he asks what the two girls are going to do. Since Lies and Beatrice were on a trip, they were just going to walk around the city. Alan understands and says goodbye for the time being. Beatrice asked if Lies was sure, because they wouldn't be able to handle it alone. Lies confirmed that she didn't want to get Alan involved in any more trouble. Alan then arrives at the Adventurers Guild where he is seen by the receptionist. She goes to evaluate the item and is shocked that it is a dragon scale, as it was a very valuable item and he had a lot of them. Then she goes to the manager saying that it was great. Until the old man with the mustache stands next to Alan with the girl and asks if Alan has a moment. He wanted to know details about that dragon. Alan found it strange that the man didn't introduce himself, so the old man apologized for not introducing himself and said that his name was Horus and the girl's name was Mylene and she was an Amazon. The old man asks if Alan got those scales on his own or if he had any allies. Alan replies that he would never be able to defeat a dragon on his own, and the old man points out that he was with the hero. And Alan says that he kicked very well. Just as they were talking, the receptionist returned with the dragon scales that Alan had collected in her hands, apologizing for the delay. She finished the evaluation and was already going to bring the money. Horus asked to be excused and said they would see each other another day. After leaving the place, Horus wanted to know what kind of person Alan was, but to him he was just an idiot with no gift, and he was upset by this. Mylene feels a little uncomfortable with Alan. It was dawn, and so the trio went to Noel to see if she had finished the sword, but when they got there, she had exhausted herself again and was asleep on the floor. Lies healed her again. She stood up and apologized, saying that she had finished the job and that it was the best sword she had made so far. Alan takes the sword and checks it out, saying it's a great sword. Noel asks to test the sword. And then Noel and Alan go into the forest. Alan asks why Noel is a blacksmith. She asks if it's so strange. Alan says that it's usually the dwarves who are suited to it. Noel tells Alan that she doesn't know where she came from and doesn't know her parents. She was found by a dwarf called Vanessa, who looked after her, but Vanessa wouldn't teach her how to forge a sword, but she managed to learn anyway. Suddenly, Horus appears in the middle of the forest with Mylene and asks Alan if he came after the monsters the guild asked for, and Alan says it was something like that. Horus said that when he returned, he would like to hear more stories. Then Noel shouts for Alan to come. And Noel looks at Horus and Mylene and finds everything very suspicious. Horus tells Mylene to follow Alan and Noel to find out more. Then Alan is testing the sword against some monsters. And Noel asks to check the sword, using her gift to check the strength, the edge and conditions that other people can't see. After checking, she says she was right about Alan. Alan is happy not to disappoint, but she wants to see him against a stronger monster, and they start to go deeper into the forest. And at the sight of a gigantic creature, Noel has a flashback of how Vanessa died to that creature and asks Alan to kill it with his sword.